Today we have with us Ms. Madhura DasGupta Sinha. She is the founder and CEO of Aspire for Her. It is a non-profit organization which is launched to motivate young women to enter into workforce. They work with a mission of creating financially independent women by turning and helping them to turn their career aspirations into action through education. She's truly an inspiration for many, and we're extremely happy to have her today with us at YCM. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Bala. Pleasure is all mine.
Yes, ma'am. So today, broadly, we would be discussing about the importance of women's participation and leadership in dispute resolution. Maybe I'll just dive right into it. So I was going through Aspire for Her website, and I found that there was you have introduced a new report on women at work, and it's a very important and insightful report. And in the report, it talks about how there are multiple conflicts that women have to deal with on a everyday basis, especially during the pandemic. So maybe you can share a little bit light on that and about how conflict management skills could be useful there.
Thank you. Yeah, the Women at Work report that we launched just last month was indeed a watershed moment for us in the history of Aspire for Her. In the very short history of Aspire for Her, which is 1 year old, we spoke to more than 800 women across the country, especially working women, and we wanted to understand the true motivations and the barriers that Indian women face. This year, it is but obvious that we talked about the impact of COVID on working women. And we found some very strange insights. First, the demographic that was worst impacted in the pandemic in all ways was probably the working women of India. And why are we saying that? We realized that the impact of the pandemic had not only a terrible economic fallout, because more women than men as a percentage actually lost their livelihoods, but it also had emotional consequences. And here's where I think some of the areas of dispute emanated both at home and at work. And I'll probably talk about a couple of them, and we can debate as to whether dispute resolution would have probably led to better outcomes even during this catastrophe that the pandemic was. First, the conflict was relating to time and resources. And that's actually very simple because we had only 24 hours in a day. We suddenly realized that a lot of resources that we had, which we had taken for granted in our lives, were not available to us anymore. That included folks who helped us in household chores, in other chores. That also included a certain time that the child spent away from home at school or in other extracurricular activities. Automatically, this resulted in a lot of extra additional burden falling on the woman, who still had those same 24 hours to complete her own work, whether it's employment or entrepreneurial pursuit that she was involved in, and also take care of all of these other responsibilities that suddenly descended on her. And that gave rise to a sense of overwhelm, that gave rise to a sense of conflict, because here she was suddenly looking for help. Like all of us are in any situation like this, when we're suddenly faced with something that seems insurmountable, we look for help. And she wasn't always getting that help from the other members of the family. And that, I think, gave rise to a huge sense of conflict within her and also within her and other members of the family. So I think it was essentially, if you really, very clinically look at the crux of the issue, it was this contest for time and resources that was creating this conflict in Indian housing. The second element is purely in terms of resource, right? I mean, everybody has an internet connection, and that internet connection suddenly in a work from home situation was being used by the husband for his office chores, by the child for her schoolwork, and the last priority was actually the woman whose work also had to be done, the working woman whose work also had to be done, but she just didn't have enough bandwidth. So I think these were some of the typical reasons why conflicts were arising in Indian households. And there are many cases where, in fact, I have seen in my immediate circle a couple of marriages go through very, very rough patches and even break down because of conflicts like this. And because people hadn't spent time in close proximity forever in their lives. And I feel very strongly that if people were trained in conflict resolution and conflict management and were able to step back and take a slightly more clinical view of this problem and why it was emanating, where it was emanating from, uh, probably we would have been in a better place, and we would have been better prepared to deal with a sudden change and upheaval in our lives like this.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I think this gives a good segue into the next question that I wanted to ask you. And there is a lack of like ownership culture in our country. So do you believe that, especially during this pandemic and in other cases also, do you believe that taking ownership of one's conflict and in some sort of way mediation also can empower women, and how do you think it can help?
So let me give you a simple example, okay? And they're not so much of a conflict, but that of a problem, and how one can take ownership of it.
Yeah.
And this actually started when I was setting up Aspire for Her. I was seeing the gender data emanating from India. And I was seeing that in terms of economic participation and empowerment, women were absolutely at the lowest rung in the world. So out of 153 countries last year, India was fourth from the bottom in the list. What does that mean? This disparity is essentially a manifestation of conflict, right? It's a manifestation of a dispute. It's a manifestation of the fact that somebody's already given up in that journey.
Yeah.
Right? So one thing that, I could have done, one thing that all of us could have done is said, it's all right. This is the way our country is going. Everybody feels like this. So it's all right. Let things go on. Let status quo go on. Let it prevail.
Yeah.
But I thought someone had to do something about it. And someone had to have that ownership. Someone had to own the problem and say, let's try and do something about it. And that's why I launched Aspire for Her. That's why when I launched it, I immediately found resonance among so many people. I mean, whether you take young leaders like Putra, whether you take CEOs, women leaders who are mentors on our platform, I just had to explain the concept to them once, Bala. And I immediately found an instant connect, an instant, sort of resonance of the cause. And they all came and said, hey, how can we help you? And therefore, I saw a huge lot of collective ownership emanating of this problem situation. And therefore, taking very concrete steps to see how we can make an ecosystem which is better for women and girls, so that actually they can move into positions which hold economic agency in some way or the other. So it's not necessarily only a conflict or a dispute, but it is this whole situation is a manifestation of the fact that there's a huge disparity, which emanates from a place of conflict and dispute.
Yeah, I agree. Ma'am, so another thing that I would like to discuss with you is I'm a law student. So in a class, we were discussing about how there's a UN study which talked about, when women mediators are involved in a dispute, the outcome of the dispute, the resolving process of the dispute becomes more sustainable and durable also. So do you believe there are certain qualities and attributes that women bring into decision making and conflict resolution process? And what do you think are those attributes?
So, Bala, I don't necessarily agree with the fact that men and women have dramatically different qualities and attributes. However, there are some attributes which are associated more with women in terms of leadership principles.
True.
We have seen some of them playing out in the world, even during the pandemic.
Yeah.
In fact, when we've seen that countries led by women leaders have reacted to the pandemic in a far more sustainable manner, and in a way in which the results and outcomes have been very different compared to some of the other countries. I'd probably like to take an example of a television character who I really love. And this character is Madam Secretary. Some of you may be seeing it. And she is, I think, she's obviously a fictitious person, but she is, I think, the representation of a leader who brings in a lot of feminine elements of leadership in the way in which she resolves conflicts and disputes, in many cases between countries, in many cases for the prevention of war. So I think every conflict resolution student should actually watch the series. But two elements that really stand out in my mind are empathy and collaboration. I think these are traditionally called feminine elements of leadership. But why it works better for conflict resolution is that, the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is very important when you're actually trying to find a solution to a problem that has lingered on for a long time. And that is associated, for good or for bad, more with women.
Agreed.
The collaboration element also brings in the fact that these leaders are far more willing to share the pie. They don't have this insane urge, which sort of winner takes it all sort of a motivation in their lives. And these are the leaders who I feel come up with solutions that can actually lead towards longer term a resolution of conflict, as opposed to just solving it here and now in a very transactional way. But these leaders bring in more transformational change, which sort of leave a legacy for generations to come. So I think these are the two elements that probably we should look at. Typical example would be what Madam Secretary does to sometimes prevent wars between nations.
I'll make sure that I recommend everyone in our organizing team that they should watch Madam Secretary. Now, I think, again, this kind of links to my other question also. You have been in numerous leadership positions, and you talk about leadership also. But in India, we often don't really talk about soft skills and human skills when it comes to talk about leadership qualities. And at YCM, we're talking about how conflict management is an essential soft skill. So what's your take on it? And do you believe conflict management skills are sort of a life skill that everyone should know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I had a fantastic conversation with some time back. And I realized something, and I hadn't thought of conflict management in as much depth before I had that conversation. But I did realize that conflict essentially rises from a sense of loss perception. It arises from the fact that somebody else is losing out on either a resource or some kind of wealth or some kind of, some superb prize that we're all sort of gunning for. And that's the reason why the conflict arises in the first place. If we are able to see, if we're able to distance ourselves from the situation, and we're able to see the view from the balcony and not from the dance floor, I think it becomes far easier for anyone to trace the background, to understand the sources of the conflict, and therefore, in a very clinical, dispassionate manner, try to figure out as to why the conflict arose, and try and ensure that there's an element of give and take in resolution of the conflict.
True.
So I think that's what it finally all boils down to. And a lot of people are unable to take that view from the balcony because they're so absolutely entrenched on the dance floor, and they're unable to extricate themselves from that situation. And that's the reason why many conflicts, I think, go on and on. And and resolution seems to be almost impossible. But creative solutions emanate when you distance yourself from the problem. That's what I feel.
Agreed, ma'am. Even at YCM, we have been having similar conversations, and this is going to really help everyone who are like listening to what you have said. And it's very insightful for me also. So I really thank you for agreeing to come to YCM and having this conversation with us. I'm very sure all our organizing committee members and also everyone at Jindal will be very happy to listen to our interview, and will learn a lot about your organization and also about everything you have talked about. Thank you for spending your time with us.
Thank you, Bala. And I'd love to welcome all you students at YCM and at Jindal to be a part of Aspire for Her. We have a 5-point mindset change model that we talk about, which includes mentors and role models, which includes learning opportunities, which includes career previews, giving opportunities to get employment, entrepreneurship, and education, and a fantastic peer community.
Yes.
So we'd love to welcome you aboard. It's free of cost, and a personal invite from my side to all the students of Jindal and YCM.
Sure, ma'am. Sure. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.